I'm JJ. Welcome or welcome back. This will be my 10 best books of 2025 video. This one was hard for me. I had some really great reads. And actually, one that I thought was going to be on here got eliminated by one that I was able to finish on the 31st. So that one displaced one that I assumed would be going on here. And then also, I do have an idea to do next year, since some of it was hard to determine fiction versus nonfiction wise, because the way that I rate books or consider books my favorite are a bunch of different reasons. One, I had to thoroughly enjoy it, and that could mean it ripped my heart out and made me cry, but it was fully immersive and engaging, and it was something personally that I liked about it. It also has to be something that won't leave my mind. Some of these books I read early in the year, and two of them I didn't realize that it was I read them this year, because it feels like they've always been a part of me. I've just been thinking about them forever, so I assumed that I had read them last year or so, just because it didn't seem like it was as recent as that. It feels like I had read them before. One of them is a reread. It's always going to be a favorite book every time I read it. And then not only does it have to make me feel things, it has to be engaging in other ways. Whether if it's a nonfiction book, makes me want to explore other areas. It makes me think differently about things. Even with fiction, sometimes I'll read something, in these books in particular, do that, is they make me want to either read more from that author, read more about that topic. If they mention something, I'm going to deep dive and try to read as much about what they mentioned as possible. And then it just has to be something that I also am dying to talk about with someone. A favorite book isn't one that I'm just going to sit and ruminate about all year long. It's going to be one that I want to talk to about with everybody that I meet, even if they're non-readers. And I apologize to my mom, because I started YouTube because we would, go on walks and stuff together, and I would be talking about books that I read, not things that I was doing in my life. And she's not even a reader, and I know that she allowed it, and even seemed interested in ask questions and stuff, but I didn't want to be that person who talks only about books to the people in my life. So I created a YouTube channel, and some of it is I created a channel to talk about some of these favorites. And then I'm excited that I only started it about 6 months ago, and I have found new favorites along the way that I got to gush about, and that was really exciting to share with you as I'm falling in love with the book for the first time, and giving you that experience with me, instead of telling you about it after the fact. So it's kind of a combination of the two, where a couple of them are things that I had already read and before I started the channel, and got to recommend and share with you, and then some of them I got to discuss in my reviews and wrap-ups along the way. So that being said, that's how they made these 10 made it. I do have copies of them. I just one of them I gifted, and a couple of them I just don't have access to at the other time, and then some of them I listened to, so I don't have it. But these are the ones that I do have, and so I wanted to start with the one nonfiction one that did make my list, and what I do want to talk about before I say it, is next year I plan to do a top 10 nonfiction and a top 10 fiction, just because the way that I engage with them is differently. And there were several nonfiction on the list that could have very well made it in this top 10, but they're not going to be ones that have deeply affected me as some of these fiction ones have, except for this one nonfiction that I included. So next year, look out for that. I will be doing a top 10 of both, which is also corresponds to the fact that I'm doing Historathon for the first time. So I'll be reading even more nonfiction than I generally do. And so this year it was only about 25%, although 25% of almost 300 is still quite a lot of nonfiction. But I still want to dedicate a top 10 to both fiction and nonfiction next year. That being said, the one nonfiction that made it on my list and is one of my top 10 of the year is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I have talked about this numerous times. It does impact and stay with you. And this is a story, Chanel's memoir. She was a girl who was the basically anonymous girl who took Brock Turner to trial because he attempted to and did assault her while she was unconscious. And his argument was that that she had said yes prior to passing out, and the evidence does not show that. None of the interactions that anyone in around her or them have said, and also the way in which he did it absolutely does not go along with his story. But it's a really great story about how women are viewed in society, especially in the United States, whether they're not believed, whether they are to blame for what happens to them. We tend to victimize or villainize the victim here. They were asking for it. Were you, what were you wearing? Were you flirting? Were you drunk? Like all the reasons why it is the victim's fault versus the person who actually did it. And so you get to experience her firsthand account of waking up essentially in the hospital, being tested for any kind of evidence and abuse, and not knowing what happened to her, not knowing where her sister was, and learning through the investigation what happened to her, and how devastating that was. You also get her full view of her life, a lot of things that what happened to her impacted and compounded, but also seeing how she views things that happened previous versus what's happening now. And so it's a really intimate, well written story and account of her life and what happened to her, and how that is not who she is, and how she finally wanted to not be this anonymous person, but she wanted the world to know her name, and to know that this happens often and more often than we want to believe, and how it is important to name the person instead of keeping them anonymous, so that we can tend to sympathize with the perpetrator rather than the victim by keeping the victims nameless. So once again, I will say her name, Chanel Miller, and it is very, very well written. it will impact you. And even reading at the end, she includes her full victim statement. And it is one of the most powerful pieces of writing you will ever read. So even if you don't read the full book, seek out that victim statement, because it is fantastic. Number two, kind of along those lines, and this is one of them that I thought I had read before, and that it just stayed with me so much that I assumed that I had read it a lot longer ago. And that was Woman at Point Zero by Noelle El Sadawi. And what I want to say about this one is, not only do I love it, but I have recently gotten her two biographies. There's a autobiographies, memoirs really, of her early life and then her life imprisoned. So she wrote about things that got her in trouble, and was trying to tell truths, and it's very similar to that Know My Name story, where this woman is on essentially death row, and she's being interviewed by this woman who wants to know what it was that you did to get you here, to be a murderer. And so she tells her life story, and it's this haunting story of in the Victorian age, we get the story of the fallen woman, whether it's Tessa de Duberville's Ruth, which I read this year and got eliminated from my top 10 recently. But you get the story of this girl who, despite her circumstances, is considered fallen because of the choices she made and what she chose to go against the grain type of thing, because this is society standards on women of that time were so hard to maintain, and any kind of deviation from that made them a fallen woman that a lot of people love to write about, and it is honestly one of my favorite themes and tropes to read. So reading the Egyptian, more contemporary version of that was utterly fascinating, because it was, essentially a fallen woman story, but also how you at one point have to start taking control of your own destiny. And this woman had no remorse for what she eventually was made to do, because in the story you see things kept happening to her, and because that happened, then more people thought they could continue to oppress, abuse, attack, use her, and how that drains on you. And eventually she wanted to just control her destiny however possible. So rather than being this victimized woman, she chose to be a prostitute, because then she could say who she could sleep with, rather than being forced unwillingly. She could now choose and then make money for it, and then that made people see her differently, think they could treat her differently, and then how trying to take control of her own destiny led to other decisions later that eventually led to her murdering someone and then being on death row for it. So you get to see this rise and fall of this woman who just wants her life back, and it's depressing, and it's hard to read at times, but I have not stopped talking about it since I read it. Another one, I don't have these in any particular order. It was just how I wrote them down. Another one that will always stay with me. It was my reread for this year, and that was Address Unknown by Catherine Cressman Taylor. And I know I've talked about this one multiple times, and I will again for January, for Epistolary January, for my recommendations for epistolary books. And this is a very, very short, I think it's under 100 pages, discussion and mental, I guess, aerobics, and understanding how somebody who seems like a decent liberal person could then fall for Hitler's fascism and become a Nazi, essentially. And so it takes, it was written in the early or the late 30s, banned in Europe as soon as it was published for obvious reasons. But she was trying to warn the world about what she saw Hitler was doing. And she wanted to show it in a way that was accessible and as scary as it should have been. And so she had a Jewish and a non-Jewish German friends living in the United States, and one goes back to Germany. And their friends, the non-Jewish man even dated the Jewish man's sister at one point. They were business partners, their families were friends. He moves to Germany, and at first he's starting to criticize the government there and what's being done, and then slowly, as they're writing back and forth, you see him slowly start to talk more about, the Jewish problem. And then at first he was like, but not you, you're one of the good ones. And then it totally just, you derailed, and you saw there's some haunting twists in there that the title comes from, and I don't want to give it away because it is absolute a gut punch in under 100 pages. And I will recommend it to anyone and everyone, and every time I read it, I'm still like haunted and like punched by it. Number 4, The Reformatory. This was a more recent read. I only started reading horror lately. I have enjoyed Stephen Graham Jones stuff, but The Reformatory by Tanner Reeve Dew, that story is the horror that stuck with me. And it's a haunting story about how the ghosts in the story are not the monsters. How you can see the parallels. So this is a reformatory school. They call it a school, but it's essentially a prison for a lot of them are black boys in the South during Jim Crow era, and it parallels very well. If you want to read something similar, it reminds me of Indian Horse, which is the indigenous version of these schools, where you get this horror and this horrible stuff happening to these children. And so this kid gets sent to one of those and has to endure so much because the warden there and all his cronies are awful, abusive people, and he makes a friend there, a couple friends, he starts seeing ghosts, including one, his mom comes to visit him, and he starts to have to, in order to reduce his sentence, can start hunting down these ghosts for the warden. But as he starts to do that, he's finding more and more stuff that the warden has been doing, and the secrets he's been keeping at the school that the ghosts are trying to help him reveal. And so he has to choose if he wants to think about himself and his family and try to get out there as soon as possible, or if he wants to be on the side of the ghosts and tell their story and get justice for them, and expose the warden for the criminal he is. And so it's a great story that has so much depth and so much baggage to explore. And number 5, I do have on here. So this one is actually, I would probably list number 1 because it's a trilogy, and all 3 in this I gave 5 stars. This is my first time I read anything by Frederick Backman, and I don't know if it's Backman or Bachman. This is Beartown, and it is a hockey town, but it is so much more than a hockey story, because the daughter of the hockey club owner is the hockey star basically forces himself on her, and she comes forward, and it ruins the town because they believe him and not her, and they want to keep it about sports, but it's so much more than sports. It's politics, it's economy, it's us versus them, it's the haves versus the have-nots, it's the just the sense of community, and what it means to be part of this town, what it means to be an outsider in this town, and you get so much depth from all the members of this town. Some are good, and they make mistakes, and they kind of, need to have a redemptive moment. Some are bad and get their redemption. Some are, they're all complex. They're all have their problems, but they're all just trying their best. And sometimes they, that what's best for them is not what's best for the town and for their family, and they have to decide what matters to them. And so there's just so much wrapped up in a fantastic sports story as well. And so this is Beartown, and then there is Us Against Them, and then The Winners. And I read all 3 of them this year, and as you read them, the town grows, the depth of it grows. It feels like a real town, real people, your neighbors, friends. You can kind of see yourself and the people around you and the different characters in this book. And also the stakes keep getting higher because you can't stay silent when something this traumatic happens, especially when you realize that you were on the wrong side and now a reckoning is coming. So I cannot say enough about these books, and because I am only putting one of the 3 on this list of 10, I would probably have to say that this would be my top, just because I loved all 3 of them. And then going along with more Frederick Bachman is his newest book, My Friends, which I also read after those, and he will be more of my reading in the coming year, just because I have loved every single one. This one I talked in detail about when I read it, so I won't talk about as much about it now, but this one is a great story of found family, of friendship, of the importance of art and human connection, and how art matters and connects us all. The person painting in this instance versus the person viewing it and feeling something and having emotions from that, and what that inspires, and how it would feel to, in this instance, not only does the teenage girl get to meet her idol who painted the painting that gave her hope, but she is one of the few people who saw the painting for what it was, and it was a group of friends on a deck. And she always wanted to know what those friends were laughing at. She wanted to be a part of their group. She wanted that community, that friendship, that sense of belonging. And as a foster kid, she'd never had that. She had one person that she just recently lost, so now she's lost in this world, and she's clinging to this art in this way it made her feel. And she meets the artist, but then through him she meets one of the boys on the dock, and he kind of through her persistence gets to relive his childhood and his mistakes and his memories of that summer that inspired that painting, through her and through sharing it with her, as she gets to feel finally like part of that group and like she belongs. And I don't know why it's making me emotional just talking about it, but I think all these books have gotten some emotions of me. But this one just felt, like when you find a book that you need right at the time that you need it. And I think that this is what this book was for me. Let's see if there's any other ones that were not on here. The other one that I do not have is Patron Saints of Nothing by Randy Ribby. And that one I do have a copy of. I just don't have access to it. And that book was another one that I read at the beginning of the year that feels like it's always been with me, and that it was that I read it before this year, that it's been longer than that. And so this book is about a Filipino American teenager who finds out his cousin is dead, and the family secret is that his cousin was a drug addict who was murdered because of his addiction. And this is during the Philippines war on drugs. There was blanking on the president's name, who was a dictator type of person who used war on drugs to essentially eliminate his competitors and his competition and any undesirables within his country. And so the kid travels to the Philippines to find out what really happened to his cousin, because he does not believe that that's what it was. And it takes him on this great journey of rediscovering his identity as a Filipino, because he's been living in America, and so he felt this disconnection from his family there. And so he gets to reclaim that. He gets to reconnect with some of his family. He gets to follow this mystery so that it can help him with his grief and understanding and his guilt, because he had stopped writing his cousin once he got to high school and had his own friends, and was interested in girls again, for the first time, and didn't have time to write to his cousin who lived a half a world away. So he has this guilt that, maybe if I had, maintained my friendship with him, he wouldn't have gotten into the trouble that he got into. I would know the truth instead of having to come all the way out here just to find out if I even knew him at all. And so it has a lot of depth. It is a YA novel because it is following this teenage boy, but just like all of my other favorites, it has this way of making you understand and see things, because I had gone down a rabbit hole with Filipino literature. I read A Heart is in America, which was mentioned in there, and there's a couple of other ones that I have been trying to find at my library, and I think I can get them. I just was trying to find the audio version of some of the Filipino classics that were written of, like basically the hero and founder of the Philippines had written some stuff that's very influential to the Filipino people, and so I have been putting them on my TBR and trying to slowly make my way through those as well, because this really inspired me. But it's also a meditation on grief and how we tend to basically put the dead on pedestals, make them martyrs or heroes, and don't always remember or want to see their flaws, because we think we can't talk ill of the dead, and how this investigation leads him to some discoveries about his cousin that he might not have wanted to learn particularly, and how that affects his memories of him, and should he be happy that he's learning new stories about him, because when somebody's gone, you tend to have to dwell on your memories because you don't get to make more. But it's always good when you come across somebody who has different memories of them, so that you can learn new things about them, and that they can continuously live on that way. But how exciting that is versus finding out the things that you didn't want to know about them, and would you rather have all your memories be unchanged and not get any more information ever about that person that you loved, or would you want to find out everything you can, despite the fact that some of it might be unflattering, and it really makes you think about how to grieve, and how we feel about the dead and their memory. So it, like I said, has stuck with me since I read it, and I do want to read more of his work, but I'm also trying to read from other countries as well. But if anyone has any Filipino nonfiction books, especially not as modern, but some of the older stuff for, during the wars and colonization and stuff, I would like to know that as well. And I do apologize for the heat that keeps coming on. It's another really cold day here in Michigan. And then the last three are ones that I do have with me. This one is the one that Edged Out Ruth by Elizabeth Glasgow, which I do highly recommend. That was a good book as well, a great classic. And I will be talking about that one more in the future anyway, because I'll be reading a companion type of book for it. But this one, I just did a full discussion of this one in my December wrap-up, so I'm not going to go into full detail. But this is a graphic novel, memoir, bit of a history of this a family saga, about the Holocaust, about what it means to for empire and imperialism and expansion and colonization, and how that affects all peoples, not just the colonized, but the ones who are complicit in that colonization, because they're benefiting from that advancement of their country, and also memory, and how memory changes, and how what we remember, or what we choose to forget, impacts us, and the people intergenerationally. Because if you don't want to talk about your past, then your children and your grandchildren, they don't know what you went through, what their family endured. They don't know some of that stuff that led to trauma, or neglect or abuse. Like, they don't understand it and how it impacted them. And so this is a really thoughtful, wide, sprawling history story that starts with the tracing of his family tree, trying to understand his great-great-grandmother, or his great-grandmother and his great-grandfather, but then getting broader and understanding the lead up to the Holocaust, and then everything in his life after. So definitely recommend this book. Another one that I just talked about in my December wrap-up was Next Time Will Be Our Turn, so I'm not going to go into great detail. It's a beautiful story about a grandmother who sacrificed herself and the love of another woman to do the right thing, and perform her duty to her family, to not have shame brought on their family by admitting that she wanted to be in a relationship with a woman, and how now seeing her granddaughter hide her own identity, wants to come clean, inspire her, and let her know that it is okay to be who you are, and love who you are, and not be making the same mistake she did by putting family and duty over her life or her love or her happiness. And so you get this beautiful story of this grandmother trying to reach out to her granddaughter, and then in doing so she shares her story. And she was a fabulous character, fabulous strong woman whose story was absolutely fascinating. And it does follow a Chinese Indonesian woman, and so you get that culture, that the heritage, the patriarchy, the stigma for sexuality, and also for mental illness. You get all this wrapped up into a very beautiful, very heart-wrecking love story. And then one of the first books I read this year that has stayed with me ever since was Martyr, and this is by Kava Akbar, and this one is about a guy who is obsessed with martyrdom because his mother died in a plane crash. Not a crash, but it was like an attack. And so he is obsessed with what makes a good death, a meaningful death. And so since he's so fascinated by dying properly, he has not been living well. He is lonely and isolated. He's does drugs, and he struggles with his job, doesn't even know if he wants to stay. He doesn't really have a lot of relationships or friends. He just kind of skidding by life because he's more fascinated with death. And there is this woman he learns about who is dying, and she's doing this exhibit at a museum in New York where you can talk to her and ask her any questions that you want. And he goes there and he spends days with her, just fascinated and trying to understand her thoughts on death. And he believes that she's the perfect martyr because she's making her death meaningful by allowing and exposing it to whoever wants to listen. And I like the meditation on the importance of life by discussing the meaningfulness of death. And it does go back in history. There was a very interesting couple of twists where you get to find out about his mother's history. I actually really liked her part of the story, and how there were things about her that he didn't know, and I liked and was surprised by that. I kind of saw the end coming because they were focusing on the aspect of that her past, but I feel like it didn't take away from the story because the story is more about him realizing he needs to actually make connections in his life, and he needs to focus more on the present and the future rather than his past. And so I think that's what I liked about this the most. And like I said, there are just some books who you read it at the correct time and it was exactly what you needed. And I think this was another one for me. You know, if I ever do a reread, I'll see if it still sticks with me, but I know that it did. He would quote poetry and mention, so he's an Iranian American, so I actually was inspired to read a lot of Iranian literature, Iranian history stuff from this, and one that I'm going to be listening to in the future, hopefully soon, is one that he recommended or mentioned in this book called My Uncle Napoleon, which is a humorous Iranian novel, and he said that a lot of Iranian literature makes people think that that we're depressed and obsessed with death, but that, you know, throws that all out of the window, and it shows you that we can have a really wicked sense of humor. And I found that amusing, and I do want to read that. But this is what I was talking about when you read something, and not only does it stick with you, but because you read it, you want to learn more. So this inspired me to delve, like I said, into more about Iran. I read a couple of really great Iranian history books this year. I've already done wrap-ups of them in some of my other videos, so I won't recommend them here. But I love it when a book makes you kind of branch out and explore more just by mentioning something, and this is one that did that. So anyway, those are my top 10, and it was hard. There was a few that were really close, you know, knocking things out and making some changes and stuff. I overall had a very fantastic reading year. I feel like the more that I'm branching out into new territory, whether it's genres like horror that I didn't think to explore before, or now that I'm reading translated literature and books from people from other countries, I have an appreciation for those, and they've been inspired me to read differently, and I feel like my tastes have changed and have grown a bit just because of allowing myself to explore new things and just see where those different things take me, rather than limiting myself to what I assumed were some of my favorite genres, and then just realizing that I just like reading in general, and a good book is a good book. So I hope I find more in the coming year. I know that I will, but we'll see if any of them are even on par with these or above. And if you do have any recommendations, if you've read any of those, liked or disliked them, if you have any recommendations inspired by any of those, I would love to know. And I would also like to know what some of your favorite reads of 2025 were, and what maybe some of your most anticipated reads for 2026 are. And as always, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reading. And enjoy. Have a great 2026 happy year of reading.